This review contains spoilers.
Hello and welcome to Films and That, my name's Sam Hall. The nature of adapting a novel to screen has always been a complex one, but ever since the development of narrative film, audiences have wanted to see their favourite books on screen. But what if somebody made an adaptation that was so near perfect that anything that followed it would just pale in comparison? Well, enter Evelyn Waugh's magnum opus, Brideshead Revisited, a semi-autobiographical story about love, religion and the slow collapse of the British aristocracy. Though few can compare to Oscar Wilde, Evelyn's command of wit nevertheless reaches a high benchmark that Wilde may well have enjoyed. Brideshead Revisited wasn't adapted into a film initially. The first adaptation came 36 years after the release of the book and 15 years after Evelyn had passed. It came in the form of an 11-part serial produced by Granada TV. Personally, I'd argue it's probably the best thing Granada ever made. It was beloved by critics and audiences alike, a roaring success at the time of release. Brideshead is narrated by our protagonist, Charles Ryder, performed expertly by the dulcet tones of Jeremy Irons. At the height of the Second World War, Ryder reminisces over his time spent at Oxford University, and how a chance encounter led him to become closely associated with the blue-blooded Marchmain family. Ryder and the Marchmains became intrinsically linked. They treat him as a son and brother, for some, a lover, but no matter how close the relationship is, his attitude towards their devout Catholic faith means he always remains a step outside of the inner circle. The dialogue is the epitome of wit, the mise-en-scène sublime, the music like swilling the very best French champagne, the performances are to die for. Every scene is meticulous, the amount of care taken from each actor is plain for all to see. Perhaps the most impressive thing about it is how loyal an adaptation it turned out to be, perhaps to the surprise of everyone. But you can't please everyone. Given that the story is quite true to the book, and a lot of the story is set in the 20s and 30s, listening to it can be a little overwhelming for the average audience. But that is nothing compared to the pace of the production, ideal for the discernible viewer, tiresome for many soap-loving Brits. You see, most studios want to reach the widest audience possible. That is the goal, and a condensed, flashier movie adaptation with lines that are short, snappy and to the point was very much in demand.
Hello, Charles.
So along comes 2008, and Miramax Films, in association with BBC Films, the UK Film Council, Hanway Films and others, released the first attempt at Evelyn Waugh's epic on the big screen. Directed by British filmmaker Julian Jarrold, who was mostly known for his television work at this stage of his career, the film retains most of the major elements of the story, but repositions the love aspect in the form of a triangle. In the original story, Ryder's first encounter with the Marchmains is through Lord Sebastian Flight, played in the TV show by Anthony Andrews and in the film by Ben Whishaw. The encounter, even the whole relationship, differs in both versions. Both involve Sebastian vomiting into Ryder's ground floor dorm room during a heavy drinking session with the Bullingdon Club. However, in the film, the two share a momentary glance. In the TV show, the extended stare could be easily mistaken for love at first sight. If you're unfamiliar with Brideshead Revisited, the debate on how close Charles and the eccentric Sebastian are has never been truly established by the author. It's my observation that both the TV serial and the film imply their relationship may have been more than platonic, but to stay true to the book, they never explicitly show this. The book, of course, having been released in 1945 when sexual relations between two men were still illegal in Britain. This aspect of the story is where me and the film diverge, not in the nature of the relationship, but in how much they rush it. Not only do we not truly understand the nature of their mutual attraction to each other in the film, their friendship is by and large established via a short yet pleasant montage sequence. In short, it feels unearned, and the audience is left wondering why on earth Charles remained so loyal to Sebastian. This for me is the first oh no.
I have a list called My Oh No Nos.
In Granada's version, we see more of Sebastian's charm, his eccentricities such as his favourite teddy bear he carries around with him. His hedonistic lifestyle seems more endearing at first, more intriguing. Furthermore, when Sebastian inevitably falls off the horse, so to speak, and succumbs to alcoholism, the reasoning is more nuanced. It's not just a reaction to his mother's staunch Catholicism, Jealousy of Julia doesn't even come into it as it does in the film. It's his upbringing, his outlook, his convictions, his conflictions, his father's absence, and the way that he has been coddled without truly being given the opportunity to fend for himself.
And you will have me to let you meet them.
Anthony Andrews plays this incredibly well. His performance is clearly well researched, and in the film version, it's more clumsy exposition, whilst Wishaw continually holds a drink in one hand.
I'm fine so long as I've got plenty of this.
Even in this scene, in which Sebastian is trying to escape a member of his mother's cohort, Mr. Samgrass, he's drinking in full view of everyone around him. Alcoholics tend to be more insidious, especially following an intervention. They know how to obtain what they crave without letting on to everyone else. As a result, I feel that Sebastian's downfall comes across as less tragic, more of a mere afterthought, and later scenes in which he is referenced feel unnecessary, despite being pivotal in the book and TV show. What the movie does focus on more is Charles' relationship with Sebastian's sister, Julia, and it's understandable that this meeting and love at first sight element occurs much earlier on in the runtime. I think that's part of the problem with the story, is that this whole thing it's too grand to whittle down into mere 126 minutes, and given the TV show had 11 episodes. I'll get more onto this aspect of adaptation later on. The pivotal moment in the TV version for those two characters begins on a cruise, covering just under 2 episodes but merely a short scene in the film. Although there had been some clear signs of a budding attraction between the two earlier on, the moment they fall in love is built not on love at first sight, but on spending a few days alone together on the cruise. Initially, they merely intend to catch up after not having seen each other for almost a decade. But as they spoke of Sebastian, their lives, their unhappy marriages they had entered into during the intervening years, love blossomed. In the film, it's more like a Romeo and Juliet story. Julia and Charles have the hots for each other simply because the day they met, they had the hots for each other. They were prevented from falling in love because of Julia's pesky religion. This is why the film ultimately doesn't work for me, but I'll elaborate on that. Ultimately, despite being utterly in love, Julia and Sebastian's relationship is always frayed because Julia is a devout Catholic. It's part of who she is, and being a divorcee means that she is living in sin. The film's early attempts to blame the Marchmain's problems on their mother's strict adherence to Catholicism fall apart when they have to return to the conclusion of the original story that Ryder is ultimately humbled by their faith, as was Evelyn Waugh, a late Catholic convert. It's entirely possible that this wasn't what they were going for, but the way it is presented in the early part of the film puts the audience on Ryder's side throughout.
You're the reason he drinks, not me.
Who states he is an avowed atheist, changed from agnostic in the TV show. I myself identify as agnostic, but if a film is unable to win me over to its side, even a little bit, by the end I feel it hasn't quite achieved what it set out, and the TV show, I feel, achieves this to some degree. And that's the second oh no no, but these things always come in threes. So what's the third, I hear you ask? Anthony Blanche.
Is number 3 on the oh no no's list.
Or, more broadly speaking, Evelyn Waugh's great gift with witty writing. Blanche is a minor character, not exactly integral to the plot. In some ways, he could be considered part of the comic relief, but arguably the story is so rife with comedic elements, it may well be considered a comedy. Blanche knows Sebastian of old. They attended Eton together, and both attended Oxford at the same time as Charles. Blanche is a more openly homosexual character in the book. His wit, observation and put-downs are his weapon of choice.
What is?
My dear boy, the news that you've finally lost your virginity. Or perhaps I should say mislaid it.
Blanche is in the film, but he may as well have been absent. I mean, even the parts where he does partake in the plot are basically rendered meaningless, so why include him at all? His lines are so brief, when in the TV serial they're so incredibly memorable. I have to wonder how much discipline it took to keep all this up. The tics, the accent, the twitch in the eye, the wry smile, the multiple monologues.
So charming, so amusing.
Hats off to Nicholas Grace for making the part so memorable. Blanche is in a couple of scenes in the film, but only really one noteworthy appearance. A scene in which also appears in the TV show, but they couldn't be more different. Years after Charles has gone in separate ways from the Marchmain family, he becomes a world-renowned painter. Blanche discovers that he has an exhibition on nearby and makes his presence known, much to Charles's delight. Here, Blanche deducts that the savage nature of the paintings reflect his recent affair with Julia, which is, according to him, the talk of the town. This is pretty much only his third appearance in the film, and all he does is state the obvious. In the TV serial, Blanche is saying so much more, diagnosing Ryder's emptiness and his lifeless marriage.
We know, you and I, that this is all terrible type.
Inevitably, the conversation moves on to Sebastian, and Blanche recalls warning Charles of the young Lord Flight's inherent nature, surrounding himself with wonderful things because he is obsessed with ownership, with possession, and with beauty. Charles ultimately realises, begrudgingly, that Sebastian could never have truly reciprocated their love. In the film, it is Sebastian whose love is unrequited, completely transforming their relationship on the whole. Yet in both versions, Charles is forced to hold up a mirror to himself and determine whether or not he also only values that which he wishes to acquire, outward beauty rather than inner beauty. Blanche's gift is his eagle-eye understanding of human nature. A pity Sebastian didn't listen, and when Charles finally does, it's too late for him. Perhaps I've been a bit unfair on the film. I mean, as I said before, it's really difficult to condense all these films into one 126-minute runtime. The TV show got, as I said, 11-part serial. So it was able to explore all the themes of the book and all the minor characters that make it so memorable in the way that the film just kind of tosses them away. It's my honest belief that their approach shouldn't have been to add more to the film, but less. Cut out one or two of the themes altogether, then some scenes wouldn't seem arbitrary. If the focus was to be the love triangle between Charles, Sebastian and Julia, perhaps that should have been the focus. Instead, as it is in the TV show, it's bookended by scenes in World War II. We have Oxford, albeit for a few very brief sequences, a number of integral scenes, Julia's first husband Rex Mottram, Mr. Samgrass, the dry wit of Charles' father, Lord and Lady Marchmain, Lord Marchmain's mistress, the list goes on. All these characters are an integral part of the book, and by extension, the TV show. But in order to make the story more coherent and to feel less rushed, the film should have cut out as many as possible to tell a compelling story. That is not the fault of the filmmakers, of course. I can tell they were trapped between a rock and a hard place, and to be fair, they did the best they could with the limited time they had available to them. Yes, the visuals are very pretty, but the TV series still manages to connect with me on a much smaller budget. Take, for example, the scene in which Charles is shown round Brideshead, the stately home of the Marchmains, for the first time. In the film, of course, we, the audience, are able to enjoy the splendour of the architecture in all its glory. In the TV show, watch as Jeremy Irons scans the room. The lack of light, we can hardly see a great deal, and yet we are drawn into the wonder of the moment by his acting. And we do get to see more, much more of Brideshead as the TV serial progresses. It becomes yet another character. My point in all this is that the film is fine for all its advantages, but it just doesn't come close in creating the same emotional connection one can make to the TV version. But the person I feel most sorry for in the film is the casting director. I mean, take a look at the cast in the TV serial. Simon Jones, Claire Bloom, John Gielgud, Laurence Olivier, and of course Jeremy Irons. I think something the film version really did get right was Matthew Goode as Charles Ryder. I could hardly put a fault in his performance, and it fit the character so well. It's just a shame that he was competing with the sultry tones of the wonderful Jeremy Irons. Also, you can't go wrong with Michael Gambon and Emma Thompson as Lord and Lady Marchmain respectively. Yet, although most of the other performances were good enough, they simply didn't provide me with the same glorious memories of the TV show. I do believe there is a place in this world for the film, because the pacing of the TV show probably won't resonate with most viewers of today, and it's still a good introduction to the book itself, so long as you don't get too attached to the film's narrative. If you do find time to watch the TV serial, some of the elements may not be to your liking, the politics, fawning over the aristocracy, or if like me you're not particularly devout. But regardless of whether or not you disagree, this is an artifact, because it's a story that masterfully understands the human condition, subtly decoding all the building blocks that lead each character on the path they take.
Well, what a place to live in.
That's it for this time on Films and That. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and ta-ra for now.